The cold air of Riverside Falls felt even heavier on that gray morning. The funeral for the Mendoza family patriarch had brought together dozens of familiar faces, all masked by fake condolences. Clara stood motionless before the coffin, her eyes watery and her heart heavy. The sound of the organ in the background echoed like an ancient lament, carrying memories she wished she could forget. Among the whispers, only Ricardo's stern gaze pierced through her with scorn. Ricardo, impeccably dressed, moved among the guests with the same authoritative air he had inherited from his father, or at least he believed he had. To him, this funeral was less of a goodbye and more the beginning of a new era of power. He watched Clara like someone examining a flawed piece of an inheritance. The lawyer, Howard, kept his distance, but his watchful eyes betrayed a deep unease. Helena, their mother, remained seated, her face weary and her gaze lost in the distance. Her hands trembled slightly over her rosary, as if each bead was a reminder of her guilt. Not a word was exchanged between her and her children. The emotional distance between them felt wider than the funeral hall itself. Even in silence, the family tension was palpable, almost visible. Clara tried to focus on her prayers, but her mind wandered. Every memory of her father hurt her more. His advice, his tired smile, the pride he had always shown in her. Everything now blended with the fear of what was to come. Since his death, Ricardo had become unpredictable, and she knew he wouldn't let this day pass without some kind of strike. The priest concluded the ceremony with a soft hymn, asking for peace for the departed soul. Everyone stood up, and the murmurs grew louder. Clara took a deep breath and approached the coffin one last time, whispering an "I love you, Dad," through her tears. She didn't notice, however, Ricardo's cold stare fixed on her, as if he were preparing his final move. The somber atmosphere was shattered when lawyer Howard approached Ricardo, trying to say something, but the older brother ignored him, choosing instead to step onto the chapel's small podium. Everyone fell silent instantly. The sound of wind beating against the windows was the only audible noise for a few seconds. Clara, confused, looked at him, not understanding what was about to happen. Ricardo raised his voice with a false solemnity, thanking everyone for coming. His words, however, quickly took on a different tone. "Before this funeral ends, there is a truth that must be told." A murmur grew among the attendees, and Helena brought her hand to her mouth. Clara felt her blood run cold.
An absolute silence fell over the room as Ricardo pointed his finger at his sister. "This woman," he declared, "is not our father's legitimate daughter. She is the product of an affair, a shame he endured in silence." The guests were in shock. Clara couldn't react. She only heard the sound of stifled laughter and incredulous gasps.
The words cut through the room like sharp blades. Helena collapsed into her chair, crying softly. Stunned, Clara searched her mother's eyes for a denial, but found only tears. That hurt more than any accusation. Howard, visibly uncomfortable, stepped forward, but Ricardo raised his hand, demanding to be heard. "My father knew," he continued, "and he made it clear that only his legitimate children would inherit his name and fortune. It's time we respected his wishes." With that, he stepped down from the podium, leaving Clara surrounded by looks of pity and scorn. The funeral was over, and with it, the life she had known. What if, on the day of your own father's funeral, someone revealed you never truly belonged to your family? This is just the first wound in the story you're about to hear. So before the whole truth comes out, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell, because what happens after this funeral will leave you speechless. The next few hours were a blur in Clara's mind. The hall emptied slowly, but her brother's words echoed in her head like a cruel mantra. She tried to take deep breaths, but every pitying glance, every distant whisper drove the wound deeper. Outside, the heavy clouds promised rain, a perfect reflection of the chaos in her heart. Ricardo, triumphant, chatted with some relatives, handing out greetings as if he'd done something noble. Clara, in shock, approached her mother. "Mom, tell me this is a lie." Helena looked away, unable to answer. Her silence was all the confirmation Ricardo needed. "See, she doesn't even deny it," her brother taunted. Howard discreetly approached and placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. "Don't say anything right now. There are things you don't know yet." The lawyer's firm tone contrasted with the emotional chaos around them. Ricardo noticed the jester and shot them a look of contempt. "Oh, of course, the bastard's defender." Clara felt her heart tighten. "Why, Ricardo? What did I ever do to you?" He smiled coldly. "You were born. That was enough." The words felt like poison. To him, Clara was just a living reminder of everything he couldn't control. Their father's love, people's admiration, the honesty he would never have. When the rain started to fall, the hall was empty. Clara walked to the coffin one last time, now covered with flowers. "If you were here, Dad, everything would be different," she murmured. The sound of raindrops on the glass mixed with her tears. In the background, the lawyer watched, knowing this was only the beginning. Helena, devastated, approached her daughter, but couldn't speak. The weight of her guilt kept her from embracing her. Clara, feeling completely alone, left the hall. Outside, she saw her brother smiling as he signed papers with a notary. Ricardo's rush to settle the inheritance raised even more suspicions. That night, the silence in the house felt deafening. Clara tried to sleep, but her brother's voice played over her head. "Product of an affair." The words burned. Anger and pain mixed with a new feeling, the need to uncover the truth.
Meanwhile, in his office, Howard opened the safe and took out a sealed envelope with Clara handwritten on it. "Not yet, old friend," he murmured, looking at the portrait of the Mendoza patriarch, "but soon." Thunder echoed outside the window, and Clara, lying in the dark, clutched her father's rosary in her hands. Outside, the storm raged, and with it, a desire for justice was born. Dawn brought with it the weight of shame. The Mendoza house, once a symbol of prestige, was now a minefield of memories and resentment. Clara came downstairs with puffy eyes, finding Helena sitting at the table, her coffee untouched and her gaze lost beyond the window. For a moment, Clara wanted to hug her, but the chasm between them felt impossible to cross. "Mom, please, I need you to tell me the truth." Clara's voice came out trembling, almost childlike. Helena took a long time to respond, holding back her tears before speaking. "Not everything is as it seems, dear." That cryptic answer felt like an evasion. Clara felt her desperation grow. The lack of clarity was as painful as a conviction. Helena stood up slowly, trying to explain. "Your brother, he's impulsive. He said things he shouldn't have. But there are things you wouldn't understand." Clara stood up too, tears now streaming down her face. "Wouldn't understand what, Mom? That he humiliated me in front of everyone? That I'm now a disgrace?" Her mother fell silent. The silence was deafening. Outside, the wind swayed the curtains, and the sound of the trees seemed to whisper secrets. Clara took a step back, watching her mother cry quietly. "If this is a lie, why don't you deny it?" she asked, her voice choked with emotion. Helena tightened her grip on the rosary beads and replied only, "Because denying it won't erase what has already happened." That sentence shattered what little composure Clara had left.
She ran upstairs, locked herself in her room, and cried until her body ached. Outside her door, the old clock ticked away with an irritating rhythm, reminding her that life went on, even when everything seemed to be falling apart. Downstairs, Ricardo walked in without knocking, arrogance written all over his face. "I hope you've packed your bags. You'll need a new place to live once all this is settled." Helena tried to intervene, but he ignored her. "Mom, the truth is painful but necessary. She doesn't belong in this house." Helena looked at him with disappointment, but didn't have the strength to scold him. Confident, Ricardo poured himself a glass of whiskey and toasted to himself. "To the new heir of the Mendozas." His mother turned her face away, unable to watch. Upstairs, in her room, Clara stared out the window, watching the dark clouds gather in the sky. Inside her, something began to change. The pain was slowly turning into resolve. "He won't destroy me," she whispered, holding a photo of her father. "I will find the truth, no matter what it takes."
Meanwhile, the lawyer, Howard, received an anonymous phone call. The voice on the other end said only, "He's moving faster than expected. The will is not what it seems." Howard frowned. The game of secrets was just beginning. 2 days later, Clara went to Howard's office. The lawyer greeted her with a serious expression and a look of sincere compassion. "I had hoped we wouldn't need to reach this point," he said, closing the door behind her. The atmosphere was sober, shelves filled with books, the distant sound of rain hitting the windows, and a palpable tension filling the space. "Your father foresaw that something like this could happen." Howard opened a drawer and took out a sealed envelope, yellowed with time. The name Clara was written on it in her father's familiar, firm handwriting. "He gave this to me weeks before he died, with clear instructions, to deliver it only if you were wronged." Clara looked at the envelope as if it were something sacred. Her hands were trembling. "What's inside?" Howard took a deep breath. Evidence. Truths he was never able to reveal while he was alive. He leaned forward. "But it's important to wait. If we open it now, Ricardo could destroy everything before you're ready." "Ready?" Clara asked, her voice tight with contained anger. "He humiliated me in front of the whole town. What more do I need to be ready for?" Howard remained calm. "You need a strategy. Your enemy isn't just your brother. It's the power he controls. He has allies, money, and influence." She nodded, still shaken. The lawyer opened a folder and showed her some documents. Property records, dates, signatures. "I found something strange here. There are inconsistencies in the inheritance papers. Altered dates, erased names. This isn't a simple mistake. Someone tampered with the will." Clara studied the papers carefully. Her heart was racing. "Do you think it was him?" Howard looked at her intently. "I'm almost certain of it." The words sounded like a verdict. She leaned back in her chair, trying to process the revelation. "So he planned all of it." Howard nodded. "Your father suspected as much. He started investigating before he died, but he didn't have enough time to finish." The tension in the room was thick. Clara closed her eyes for a moment and remembered her father's voice, always saying, "The truth comes when the heart is ready." "So that's it," she said, opening her eyes with determination. "I'm going to fight." Howard allowed himself a faint smile. That's what he would have wanted. He put the envelope away, locking it back in the safe. But until the right moment, no one else can know. When Clara left the office, the rain had stopped, but the ground still reflected the dark clouds. She looked up at the sky and took a deep breath.
The pain was still there, but alongside it, something new was being born: courage. In his car, watching from a distance, Ricardo observed the scene with a suspicious expression. He didn't know what was happening, but he felt that something was slipping from his control. And for a man like him, that was unacceptable.
The Mendoza office felt more like a battlefield than a place of business. Ricardo paced back and forth, irritated, shouting orders at his private lawyers. "I want everything in my name by the end of the week. The house, the accounts, the company, everything." His assistant hesitated, intimidated by the new boss's aggressive tone. Deep down, Ricardo's anger wasn't just about controlling the estate. It was fear. Fear that something might slip from his grasp. Since the funeral, Clara had become a problem he couldn't predict. The simple fact that she hadn't reacted with desperation made him uncomfortable, as if she knew something he didn't. That afternoon, he went to his mother's house. He found Helena on the porch, watering the plants with a distant look in her eyes. "Mom, I need your signature to finalize the probate," he said, holding out some papers. Helena didn't even look at him. "You've already taken from Clara what mattered most, Ricardo. Her name, her dignity. Now you want the rest?" Ricardo forced a cynical smile. "I'm just following what Dad wanted." Her voice trembled. "Don't you dare use his name to justify your lies." For a brief moment, Ricardo's expression hardened, and something dark flashed in his eyes. "Lies are what keep this family standing, Mother." The words hung in the air. Helena let the hose drop, looking at her son with contained despair. "You don't know what you're saying." He leaned in, cruel. "Oh, I know very well, and if you don't sign, you'll find out that I also know secrets you might not want exposed." Helena turned pale. He picked up the papers and tossed them onto the table. "Sign, or you'll regret it." Then he left, slamming the door. Outside, he took a deep breath and pulled out his phone. "Hire a private investigator," he ordered someone. "I want to know what Clara is up to, everything." Meanwhile, Clara, in the small apartment she had rented temporarily, was trying to sort through her father's belongings: old folders, newspaper clippings, handwritten notes. Every detail seemed to hold a clue. When she found a photograph of the three of them, her, Ricardo, and their father, she felt a sharp pang in her chest. "Why did he hate you so much, Dad?" she whispered. Howard called her at that moment. "Clara, I need you to come to my office tomorrow. There's something new. Something I found in the company archives." Clara agreed, feeling the weight of expectation. Across town, Ricardo watched the city lights come on from his parked car. "She thinks she can challenge me," he murmured to himself, taking a sip of whiskey. "But she has no idea what I'm capable of." And for the first time, his fear turned into hatred. That night, Clara had a nightmare. She dreamed of her father, standing before her, trying to say something, but making no sound. Behind him, Ricardo laughed while signing papers that turned to ashes. She awoke with her heart racing. The clock read 3 a.m., and the silence in the apartment felt almost oppressive. She got up and went to the mirror. "What if he's right?" she whispered, staring at her own reflection. Ricardo's words still echoed in her mind. Product of an affair. Part of her wanted to believe it was all a lie, but the doubt was eating her up inside. In the morning, she went to the coffee shop where her childhood friend, Evelyn, worked. Her friend greeted her with a warm hug. "You look like a ghost, Clara." She tried to smile. "That's how I feel." She told her everything: the funeral, the accusations, her mother's silence. Evelyn listened quietly, holding her hand.
If he's so sure of himself, it's because he's afraid of something. The truth doesn't shout like that. It watches and waits for the right moment to be revealed. Those words gave Clara a spark of hope. When she arrived at Howard's office, he was already waiting for her with a folder on his desk. "I found something in the company records," he said, showing her a series of documents. "Duplicate signatures. Ricardo forged your father's signature on 3 contracts, transferring company shares to himself." Clara was in shock. "So he's stealing?" Howard nodded. "And there's more. I found dates that don't add up. There are signs the will was tampered with, but we have to confirm it before we act." She looked at the lawyer with determination. "Then let's confirm it." On her way home, Clara passed by the old family house. The lights were on. Through the window, she saw Ricardo shouting at their mother, papers scattered across the living room. Helena was crying. Clara's heart tightened. Part of her still wished things could go back to the way they were. But when she saw her brother shove their mother in a fit of rage, something inside her broke. Pity gave way to fury. Ricardo wasn't just cruel, he was dangerous. That night, Clara wrote in her journal, "I don't want revenge, I want justice, and this time he will hear the truth from our father's own mouth." Meanwhile, in his office, Howard locked the envelope away again. The sound of the safe closing echoed through the room, like a warning from fate. The moment of revelation was getting closer. The next morning was cold and quiet. Clara woke up with a different kind of determination. Fear had made room for the need to act. She took a box of her father's old documents and spent hours reviewing every paper, every signature, every date. The smell of old paper mixed with the bitter aroma of cold coffee, and time itself seemed to stand still. Between the pages, she found a hospital receipt dated 1993, the year Ricardo was supposedly born. But the document mentioned another patient's name, Michael Green. The detail piqued her curiosity. She wrote the name down, deciding to investigate. Something didn't add up, and she knew this was just the tip of the iceberg. Later that afternoon, she called Howard. "I found a strange name in my father's old documents, Michael Green. Can you find out who that is?" The lawyer promised to look into it. It could be important. Sometimes the truth hides in the details.
Meanwhile, Ricardo was meeting with his lawyers over an expensive dinner downtown. He projected confidence, but inside he was uneasy. Ever since he'd noticed Clara's quiet behavior and the lawyer's movements, he had a feeling something was coming. "She's not going to take what's mine from me," he said, his expression hard. "Even if I have to destroy what's left of this family." Across town, Clara received a call from Evelyn. "I found something," her friend said, sounding excited. "There's a hospital record under that name, Michael Green, and the mother's maiden name is listed as Helena." Clara went cold. "The same name as my mother?" Evelyn confirmed it. "Yes, and there's a note. The baby was registered under a different name a few days later." It felt like the floor disappeared beneath her. Clara sat down, breathless. "My God, could it be?" Her voice failed her. Evelyn stayed silent, respecting the gravity of the moment. Clara felt the puzzle pieces were starting to fit together, and the final picture was going to be painful. That night, she dreamed of her father again. This time, he was smiling and pointing to a locked drawer, the same one that was in his old office. When she woke up, her heart was racing. It was as if her father was still guiding her, even after his death. Determined, she went to the old house the next day, knowing Ricardo would be out. She used her spare key and went up to the office. The smell of wood and dust brought back memories. She searched through the drawers until she found a locked one, the one from her dream. She forced the latch, and inside, she found a cassette tape labeled "For Clara." Her heart started pounding.
She held the tape to her chest, her hands trembling. In that moment, she knew the truth was closer than ever. Helena hadn't slept that night. Guilt was eating away at her like a silent poison. She knew the secrets she had kept for decades were about to come out, and that a mother's love might not be enough to heal the wounds it would cause. When Clara showed up at her door that morning, the older woman understood the moment had arrived. "Mom, I found something." Clara was holding the tape in her hands, her eyes glistening with tears. "I need to know the truth." Helena looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Are you sure, dear? The truth can sometimes hurt more than the lie." Clara nodded. "I'd rather have the pain of the truth than be trapped by doubt." Her mother took a deep breath and sat down slowly. "The name, Michael Green, you found it, didn't you?" Clara froze. "So it's true." Helena began to cry. "Before I met your father, I made a mistake. I had a brief relationship with a man who disappeared soon after. When Ricardo was born, I wasn't married yet. Your father raised him as his own, but he never forgot what happened." Clara felt the ground drop out from under her. "So, Ricardo is the illegitimate son?" Her mother nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, and your father found out years later, but he decided to raise both of you as equals. But Ricardo always knew. He found the old birth certificates and started to blackmail me."
A heavy silence filled the room. Clara held back her tears, trying to process everything. "And why didn't you tell me?" Helena looked down. "Because I was afraid of losing both of you. And in the end, I lost you both anyway." Anger, sadness, and compassion swirled inside Clara. She stood up and began pacing the room. "He destroyed Dad's name, he tarnished his memory, and you protected him?" Helena cried helplessly. "I know, my dear, but now you're the only one who can fix what I did wrong." Clara looked at the tape again. "Did Dad know?" Her mother nodded. "He found out shortly before he died. He said he would leave proof." Helena's eyes filled with hope. "If he left you that recording, it's because he wanted you to be the guardian of the truth." With her heart torn between love and anger, Clara hugged her mother. For the first time in a long while, they felt united, no longer by appearances, but by shared pain. When she left the house, the cold wind brushed her face, and she felt the weight of destiny. Inside her bag, the tape seemed to pulse. Clara knew that once she pressed play, nothing would ever be the same. Meanwhile, Ricardo watched from a distance, sitting in his car parked across the street. Seeing his sister leaving, holding something in her hands, he frowned. "What on earth did she find now?" he muttered, and for the first time, fear shone in his eyes. Night had fallen over Riverside Falls when Clara, trembling with anxiety, walked back into Howard's office. The lawyer waited with a tense expression, noticing what she carried in her hands. "Is that the tape?" Clara nodded, her eyes fixed on the object. "It's time to hear what my father wanted me to know." Howard placed the tape in an old player and pressed play. The initial static filled the room until the familiar, deep voice echoed. "If you're hearing this, Clara, it's because the truth finally needs to be told." Tears streamed down her face uncontrollably. It was her father's voice, alive, calm, filled with both pain and love. "I discovered that Ricardo is not my biological son," the recording continued. "Your mother made a mistake before we met, but I chose to forgive her. I raised him as my own, gave him my name and the same love I gave you. But the resentment grew inside him and turned him into something I never imagined." Howard looked at Clara, surprised by the weight of the revelation. "He found out that Ricardo forged the will," the recorded voice explained. "He used my illness and my exhaustion to deceive me. He believes blood determines the value of a name, but the real bastard is the man who betrays the heart of his own family." Clara brought her hand to her mouth, sobbing. "Dad," the recording continued, "I trust you, my daughter. Keep this proof until the right moment. When the lie tries to erase your name, let the truth speak for me." A click ended the message. The silence that followed felt almost sacred.
Howard turned off the recorder and took a deep breath. "This changes everything, Clara. We need to use this recording, but carefully. If we act now, he'll try to destroy the evidence." Clara wiped her tears and responded firmly. "He's already destroyed everything he could. Now it's my turn to rebuild what's left." In the following days, Howard began gathering documents, cross-referencing information, and preparing what would become a legal bombshell. Meanwhile, Clara maintained her silence, pretending to be compliant. She knew the calm before the storm was her greatest weapon. Ricardo, however, could sense danger in the air. Seeing that Clara wasn't reacting made him suspicious. "She's plotting something," he told one of his associates. "Find out who she's been meeting with." The man looked at him hesitantly. "What if it's the lawyer?" Ricardo smirked. "Then he'll learn the price of meddling in my family's affairs." That night, Clara fell asleep listening to her father's voice again. Every word seemed to guide her, strengthening her heart. For the first time in weeks, she felt at peace. But she knew dawn would bring war. The next morning brought a different feeling to the town. Clara arrived early at Howard's office, carrying a determination the lawyer recognized immediately. "Are you ready?" "More than ever," she replied, "but I want it to happen in front of everyone. The family, the lawyers, the press, if necessary. He destroyed me in public. He'll hear the truth the same way." Howard nodded, admiring the young woman's courage. "Your father would be proud of you." They spent the morning organizing documents and preparing the evidence. The recording, the forged contracts, Michael Green's hospital records. Each piece formed a damning portrait of Ricardo's fraud. Meanwhile, Ricardo was trying to cement his image as the rightful heir. He invited investors and gave speeches about family honor and tradition. But rumors were already circulating. Small inconsistencies in his stories, contradictory dates, and his evasive behavior were drawing attention. He could feel the noose tightening, even without knowing where the blow would come from. Helena, overwhelmed by guilt, went to see the lawyer. "I want to confess everything," she said, tears in her eyes. Howard calmed her. "Not yet, Mrs. Mendoza. The moment of truth needs to be carefully timed. Otherwise, Ricardo might slip away." The mother nodded, trembling. "I just want my daughter to be free." That evening, Clara reviewed the speech she had written. She wanted her words to be firm, but without hatred. The truth isn't about revenge. It's about justice. She repeated the phrase in front of the mirror, feeling the weight and power of every syllable. Across town, Ricardo drank alone, watching the fireplace. The flickering flames reflected in his cold eyes. He picked up the phone and called a mysterious contact. "Find out what she and Howard are preparing. If they find anything, I want it back, whatever it takes." The next morning, an invitation was sent to all members of the Mendoza family. An extraordinary meeting at Howard's office to clarify inheritance matters. Ricardo received the notice and smiled confidently. "Finally," he murmured, "time to bury that bastard for good." Little did he know that this very meeting would become the burial ground for his own lies. The morning of the meeting dawned cloudy, as if the sky itself reflected the tension hanging over the town. Howard's office was packed. Relatives, lawyers, longtime employees, and even a few curious reporters from the local press. Ricardo entered first, confident, with a victorious smile and steady steps. "Finally, let's put an end to this charade," he said, adjusting his suit.
Clara arrived a few minutes later, accompanied by her mother. An absolute silence fell over the room. Everyone watched as if they were about to witness a duel. Ricardo shot her a look of contempt. "Here to watch your own downfall, sister?" She took a deep breath, maintaining her composure. "No, Ricardo, I'm here to watch yours." Howard began the meeting, presenting the formal documents. "We are here to review Mr. Mendoza's will and clarify any doubts about the inheritance." Ricardo interrupted him. "There are no doubts. She is not a legitimate child. The will is clear." Howard looked at him calmly. "You're right, Ricardo. But the will you presented isn't the real one." A murmur spread through the crowd. Ricardo frowned. "What are you talking about?" Howard opened a folder and placed two versions of the same document on the table. "This is the original, with Mr. Mendoza's actual signature. And this one," he pointed to the other, "is your forgery." Ricardo shot to his feet. "This is outrageous!" But Howard continued, unshaken. "We have forensic reports confirming the forgery. And what's more, he placed a recorder on the table, a message from Mr. Mendoza himself." The silence became heavy. Howard pressed play. Their father's voice echoed through the room. "If you are hearing this, it is because the truth must be told. Ricardo is not my biological son. Clara is my only legitimate heir. He forged documents and tried to erase her name." Yelena began to cry, and Clara closed her eyes, feeling a lump in her throat. Ricardo turned pale, his lips trembling. "This is a lie! You set this all up!" he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. But no one believed him anymore. The lawyer stood up. "The truth was recorded in your father's own voice, Mr. Mendoza, and the documented evidence confirms every word." Ricardo lost control. "You'll regret this," he screamed, lunging for the recorder. Howard stopped him, and security intervened. Chaos erupted in the room. Clara stood up, and for the first time looked her brother directly in the eyes. "You destroyed our father's name, trying to steal what was never yours. Now, the lie has destroyed you." He fell silent, panting, his face consumed by desperation. As security escorted him from the room, Clara turned to the attendees and took a deep breath. "My father always said that blood doesn't define character. Today, he proved himself right." The silence that followed was one of respect. For the first time, Clara wasn't seen as the product of an affair, but as the heir to the truth. The days following the revelation were a whirlwind. The local press ran headlines about the Mendoza family scandal. Illegitimate son forged his own father's will. Ricardo, once admired by the community, had become a pariah. His name, once synonymous with prestige, was now met with scorn and pity. At home, Elena withdrew, consumed by regret. "I should have spoken up sooner," she would say between sobs. Clara, though hurt, felt no hatred. "Silence is what destroys the most, Mother, but now it's over." Her mother held her hand, crying, "You have your father's heart." Meanwhile, Ricardo was planning his defense. He tried claiming manipulation, persecution, and even temporary insanity, but the evidence was undeniable. The recording, the contracts, the forensic reports, everything condemned him. His lawyers began abandoning him, one by one. His empire was crumbling like a house of cards against the rising tide. One night, he broke into his father's old office, drunk and distraught. He tore through papers, knocked over furniture, and screamed like a man on the verge of collapse. "Everything was mine! I deserved it!" The echo of his voice faded into the empty walls. When he saw the old family photo on the desk, he threw it to the ground, shattering the glass. The next day, Clara went to the old house to collect some belongings. She found the place destroyed and her brother asleep on the floor, surrounded by bottles. For a moment, she felt pity. "You could have had everything, Ricardo. Love, respect, a family. But you chose the lie." He opened his eyes, his gaze distant. "You don't understand. He loved me less." Clara knelt beside him, firm. "He loved you just the same. You were the one who couldn't accept it." For a moment, the silence between them was heavy, almost human. Then she stood up and walked away without looking back. Days later, the verdict was official. Ricardo was disinherited and formally charged with forgery and fraud. The Mendoza name now belonged solely to Clara, the only legitimate heir, and, paradoxically, the only one who never wanted the inheritance. That night, Clara lit a candle at her father's grave. The cold wind rustled through the trees, and she whispered, "The truth won, Dad, but I'd give anything to have you here, to hear you say it out loud." The flame's glow reflected in her tear-filled eyes. For the first time, the silence didn't hurt. It only reminded her that justice, though delayed, had been served. The sun rose over Riverside Falls, painting the horizon with golden hues that contrasted with the months of darkness Clara had endured. For the first time, the Mendoza house was silent, not the silence of pain, but of reclaimed peace. In the mirror, she barely recognized her own face, more mature, serene, marked by scars that time would not erase, but that told a story of courage.
Helena walked slowly into the room, holding a cup of coffee. "Are you really going to give up the inheritance?" she asked, her voice trembling. Clara nodded. "I don't want money that came from so much suffering. I just want to start over." Her mother bowed her head, tears falling onto her hands. "Your father would be so proud of you. And please forgive me, my dear, for being such a coward for so long." Clara stepped closer and hugged her, a gesture of forgiveness that sealed the end of an era built on lies. In the days that followed, Clara signed documents transferring parts of the estate to charity and to employees who had served the family for years. "They're the ones who upheld our name, not the money," she told Howard as she handed him the signed papers. The lawyer smiled, admiring her. "Your father always believed that character is the only inheritance that truly matters. Now I understand why." Meanwhile, Ricardo faced the public judgment of his actions. No lawyer would defend him. The whole town spoke his name with disgust. One day, Helena received a letter from him written while awaiting trial. He asked for forgiveness, not just for his crimes, but for never knowing how to be a brother. Helena showed the letter to Clara, who read it in silence and simply replied, "I hope he one day finds the peace he never had." At the symbolic burial for her father, a small ceremony Clara organized to scatter his ashes in a nearby lake, only a few people attended: Evelyn, the lawyer, and some longtime staff. The wind blew gently, and the water's reflection seemed to restore brightness to the Mendoza name. "Now you can rest, Dad," Clara said, letting the ashes fall gently into the water. Howard approached her. "The will has been officially corrected. The Mendoza name is clear." She smiled. "Now it belongs to the truth, not to lies." As the group dispersed, Clara stayed alone for a moment, watching the horizon. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of the past lifting. That night, she wrote in her diary, "Pain taught me to love without expectation. My brother's hatred helped me discover who I am, and my mother's silence showed me the importance of speaking when the heart asks." Then she turned off the light, ready for tomorrow. Months later, Clara was walking through the streets of a small town in rural Virginia where she had started her life over. She worked at a community clinic and rented a simple little house near a lake. The peaceful surroundings were a world away from the stifling luxury of the old mansion. Every sunset there felt like a reminder that new beginnings are possible, even when the past leaves scars. Evelyn visited often, always bringing laughter and memories of easier times. "I never thought you'd see you smile like this again," her friend said, drinking coffee on the porch. Clara smiled back. "Maybe it's because I'm finally living life on my own terms, without lies, without inheritance, just what truly matters." One afternoon, returning from work, Clara received an unexpected call. It was Lawyer Howard. "I have news," he said, his voice calm. "Ricardo's case is closed. He'll serve a reduced sentence for cooperating and returning the misappropriated funds. He's leaving the country." Clara was silent for a moment. "So, it's the end then?" Howard replied, "The end of one kind of pain, and the beginning of a well-deserved peace."
That night, Clara walked down to the lake near her house. The water reflected the full moon, and the sound of crickets created a melody of tranquility. She sat down in the grass, thinking of her father. "You were right, Dad. The truth always wins, even if it takes a while." A gentle breeze passed through, rustling the leaves, almost like a silent answer was carried on the wind. Back at the house, Clara hung a single photograph on the wall, one of her and her father, smiling in the backyard, long before everything happened. Below the picture, she wrote in small letters, "Truth is the most valuable legacy." Without luxury, without a fortune, but with a light heart, she finally slept in peace. The past no longer held her captive. It was now just a part of who she was. And for the first time in a very long time, she didn't dream of loss, but of possibilities. It was a fall morning, and the wind carried the sweet smell of fallen leaves. Clara was making coffee when she heard the quiet sound of the mail carrier leaving something in her mailbox. She picked up the curious envelope. There was no return address, just her name written by hand in a strangely familiar script. Her heart sped up. It had been months since anyone had contacted her about the past. She sat down at the table and looked at the envelope for a few seconds before opening it. Inside, there was just a single yellowed sheet of paper and an old photograph. In the picture, her father looked much younger, standing next to an unfamiliar woman and a child of about 5. On the back, an inscription written in faded ink, "Not all secrets have been revealed." A chill ran down Clara's spine. She recognized the necklace around the woman's neck, the same one her mother used to wear when she was young. "This can't be," she murmured. She picked up the letter and began to read. "Clara, if you were reading this, it means the story of the Mendozas isn't over yet. There is someone who needs to know who they really are. The truth set you free, but it still holds others captive. The past doesn't just disappear, it simply waits for the right moment to be heard again." There was no signature, just a single initial, H. Her first thought was Howard, but the lawyer would never send something so cryptic. And when she looked at the photograph again, she noticed a detail that took her breath away. The little boy in the picture had the same eyes as her father. She put the letter inside a folder and took a deep breath. Is it possible there's another heir? Another secret? The mystery rekindled something in her that she thought she had left behind. The curiosity, the courage, the instinct to search for answers. That night, she walked back down to the lake where she always found peace. The moon's reflection shimmered on the water, and the wind rustled the trees, whispering ancient secrets. Clara held the photo and spoke softly.
If there's still truth to be found, I will find it. For us, and for the name I carry." The distant sound of thunder announced a new change of season. Clara looked at the horizon and allowed herself a slight smile. She knew that one story had ended, but she also knew that another had just begun. As she walked away, a gust of wind opened the forgotten envelope on the table. Inside, a second photo was now visible, a portrait of a younger Howard standing next to Clara's father. On the back, a phrase written in blue ink: "Some secrets are worth a second chance." And so, in the echo of a past that refused to die, the destiny of the Mendozas seemed to be writing another chapter, one that Clara, without knowing it, was already destined to discover. The truth won, but have all the secrets been revealed? A new letter could change everything, and the Mendoza name might still hide more than Clara ever imagined. Subscribe now and turn on your notifications, because the next chapter of this story could be the most shocking one yet, and you won't want to find out too late.